they have leaks. Sunoco XL, one of the leading participants in this pipeline, has had 200 leaks since 2010. 13-year-old Native American girl said that there were 300 leaks by Dakota pipeline people last year. I haven't been able to check that separately, but I imagine what she says is right. One leak might be upsetting. We camped next to a Navajo family that made jewelry, and we had a long talk with them. Made friends with their grandson, 4-year-old, and people were taking care of him and gradually became friends with the family. And you know, there was this Los Alamos leak down in Colorado, and they're downriver from that. So they could feed their horses water last year until that leak, but guess what? You can't feed their horses no water. Now, have to truck it in. This ain't China, this ain't India. Or is it? The people at Standing Rock defend us. The people who risk their lives at Standing Rock defend us. Sophia Wolanski, who was crippled at Standing Rock and is still recovering, she's defending us. A lot of worry about all these people in high places. So I'm a nonviolent revolutionary. I used to just be a revolutionary. So I'm not a friend of people in high places. Perfectly willing to talk to them, and I believe that you can reach them some of the time. But if you look to people in high places, including people you elect, if you elect people, if we have a huge movement, you may be able to overcome all the money. But all the money is against the people at Standing Rock. And did this horrible thing with Sophia Wolanski, and finally the silly Army Corps of Engineers said, hey, we're stopping you from digging under the river, and Dakota Access Pipeline said, dig, 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 dig. And who's going to stop them in the winter? Oh, the Apaches are going to stop them. The Native Americans are going to stop them. Brave people like Sophia Wolanski are going to stop them. But you know, people have been demonstrating all over. In Iowa, 200 people have been arrested fighting against the Dakota Access Pipeline there. In Denmark, a lot of Danes have been protesting against the Danish National Bank, and the Danish National Bank, which is the biggest investor of these banks, has actually withdrawn its support. You want to do something against it, make trouble for Wells Fargo, which deserves trouble. Make trouble for Chase. Make trouble for all these banks. And there is now, because of the courage of people and so many tribes coming around, one of the great signs I saw there was, God a sign. I was not at Wounded Knee in 1973. The march we went on was led by Dennis Banks, who was at Wounded Knee in 1973, thank you. I was not at Wounded Knee, but I am at Standing Rock. This is the biggest thing among Indigenous people in 50 years, maybe in modern times. Met people at the camp who'd driven in from Oklahoma 15 hours Saturday night. They were going back on Sunday just to be there. People put in a tremendous effort with great resolution and dedication to protect the sacred waters, the sacred stones, the sacred land. Wow, that's pretty admirable. That ain't the silly Democratic Party. By the way, the only reason the Democratic Party is any good is that SNCC, in which my friend Andrew Goodman got killed, Philadelphia, Mississippi in 1964. I went to grade school with him. SNCC organized the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party that went to the corrupt, racist Democratic Party and forced them to admit black people. They had 2 representatives, Walter Mondale, being a typical corrupt Democratic politician. Oh, he worked it out. LBJ had a press conference because Fannie Lou Hamer was speaking. If you don't know Fannie Lou Hamer, look her up. Rural Visitville, Mississippi. Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer, the great fighter, who was beaten and fired from her job and led the Freedom Democratic Party, and they went to the Democratic Party and wouldn't listen to Martin Luther King, who was trying to talk him down for Lyndon Johnson. And King grew quite a lot in the next couple of years and spoke out against Vietnam, and Lyndon Johnson turned on him and he was murdered. The Democratic Party is any good at all and could nominate Barack Obama because of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, not because the Democratic Party itself is any good. It is good when you kick it. It is good when there's a movement from below. I grew up in the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and I got thrown out of Harvard as a graduate student for leading demonstrations against ROTC and Harvard expansion into Cambridge. And one of the interesting things was the Democrats were no damn good. That was LBJ. That was McGeorge Bundy, the dean at Harvard, was his national security advisor. Right? So yeah, the Republicans are worse. They always have it. And it's better when Democrats win. And the Democrats have had everything stolen from them, and that's why they have partly allowed 30 states to have laws which take away the right to vote from poor folks, particularly minority folks, and elderly folks, and students, and so on and so forth. We don't have the right to vote in this country. That's the main reason Trumpiola won. And if he won, I mean, quote unquote. The Democrats fight on this? Where's the fight? Who's kicking and screaming about this? Maybe Bernie, right? Who's kicking and screaming about this? I think, what was it that they said about the Broncos? Elway got himself a coach who would kick and scream. That was Kubiak before he got sick, right? Kick and scream. How do you allow, according to Greg Palast, 7 million people to be disenfranchised legitimately here? Why aren't there sit-ins about that? Why don't the Democrats kick up a fuss about that? Why are they going on about Russia? Why don't they kick up a fuss about that? So anyway, to go back to the people of Standing Rock, you want somebody admirable. You want somebody courageous. You want somebody who worships the earth and the water and wants to preserve human life for future generations. And by the way, has always had respect for nature. Indigenous people generally have respect for nature, and they haven't worked out, gee whiz, being capitalists. The transition to capitalism, by the way, was a very hard thing, and there's a great book by a Marxist feminist from Italy, Silvia Federici, called Caliban and the Witch. And it's about how witch burning fits in with what Marx called primitive accumulation. And if you read the book, you will get the idea that ordinary people have fought this forever. You know, like you're veterans against the war. Well, guess what? Ordinary people have been fighting these things forever, and you should, right? What is settler colonialism? The U.S. Army is so proud of its murder of Native Americans, right? They got symbols of Native Americans everywhere now, as if it's a great thing, when they murdered everybody, right? There are survivors, but there were 20 to 40 million indigenous people when the colonists came. And starting with the murders, the Pequot Massacre in 1638, Harvard got 2,000 acres of land out of that massacre in Connecticut. 500 men, women, and children all fall down, said the officer in charge. That has been U.S. government policy across the country. And what is happening today, when they put their boot in the face of people who are fighting back in Standing Rock and all over the country, and now all over the world, is of course just continuing cultural genocide on behalf of destroying the environment and the most corrupt and evil profit-seeking companies in the world. By the way, I always wondered when Cheney had his secret meetings with energy executives what they were about, and the New York Times couldn't figure it out. They all couldn't figure it out. Guess what? It was fracking. How you can set your water on fire. Fracking, right? Now, he's a horrible war criminal and a monster. I mean, really one of the worst of the worst, along with Kissinger and a bunch of others. But this is a special thing. You would think that somebody would care about the environment, right? We've had an environmental movement. We've had young people powerfully interested in this now. None of them, under 40, it was about 80% against Hillary, right? They're all voting for Bernie. Under 40. People are very concerned about the environment. People don't like neoliberalism. They don't like being stuck with 100 grand of debt for a master's degree in international studies or 250 grand for a PhD. I had a student, wonderful student, Chinese American, teaching in Cambodia. Got 250 grand of debt. I don't know how she ever works out from that. Except that it's forgiven. So, as I say, I'm a revolutionary. I really like Bernie, and I would much prefer that we not have to have revolution. Right? Personally, I got other things to do. But it's going to take a lot to reverse this stuff. Bernie's campaign got Hillary to be not simply a neoliberal, but a human being about college debt, barely. And with the agreement he had with her, if the Democrats had been elected, something would have been done about this, debt slavery. Takes a movement. Bernie went to Standing Rock. Bernie went and demonstrated at the White House about stopping the Dakota Access Pipeline. I would just say, Bernie's been at it for 40 years. I'm not the biggest fan of democratic socialism either. But Bernie is the genuine idol. Right? More than we deserved in public life here. But beyond this, the people at Standing Rock, the indigenous people, are the heart of America. Not the settler America, which has always been murderous and corrupt. Not the people who had the fancy rifles who killed all Native Americans, although often people did resist them. And Sitting Bull did pretty good against Mr. Custer. I had to deal with some other folks on a committee about John Evans, for which I have a professorship which is being renamed. Some people from Northwestern, and I'm afraid that I upset them because I said, it'd be like the Warsaw Ghetto uprising murdered Himmler. So I like Sitting Bull myself and the people he led. And I don't like the U.S. Army and the people who pursued manifest destiny all the way to the Philippines. And you can look at what the U.S. Army did in the Philippines, and you might say, gee whiz, why didn't they tell me that before I went to Nam? Why didn't they tell me that? How come I got taught history and I never got taught this? How come people talk about American history like it's an honorable thing? We had slavery, and we wiped out the indigenous people, except that there are a lot of people who are there in there fighting. Wow. So that's pretty good that they're in there fighting. And we should fight with them, however we can. And there are lots of different ways. But whatever any of us can do to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline and to stop the revival of the Keystone XL pipeline, which is to get lousy, dirty tar sands coal for China, of all things, that would be good. So turning to Tibet, I made the point to a number of groups there, practically everybody we spoke with, I couldn't resist, that really the latest news about Standing Rock is that massive numbers of ordinary Americans have come to support the people of Standing Rock, and that the people of Standing Rock are the water protectors for all of us. And the Tibetans, partly the Dalai Lama is actually, Plato wrote what I regard as a satire of the so-called philosopher king, which is much brooded about by people who don't do classical scholarship very well. But actually, if there's somebody kind of like that in the world, it probably is the Dalai Lama. And if there's a more admirable human being than the Dalai Lama, I haven't run across him. And the Dalai Lama really, out of the great violence and genocide which the Tibetans have been greeted with, stands up for compassion and stopping the Chinese but not murdering them. And that is so admirable, and listening to him is admirable. So I'm a great admirer of his. Having said that, he decided not to be a leader of a nonviolent movement. He isn't. And his nonviolence is not effective. The Tibetans are nonviolent now. The CIA funded screwy violence in Tibet against the Chinese. They armed people with muskets because you wouldn't want the weapons traced back to the CIA. Guess what? Everybody knew the weapons came from the CIA. And as Losang Sering, who went and fought there and is a big critic of the Dalai Lama, said, "They had us fighting the wrong part of Tibet." It's completely useless. Anyway, even he